And Elder Terry, if you'd like to open in prayer, and if you turn when you turn your camera on, I'll spotlight you. Thank you.
Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you for accommodating me on your Friday night. Happy Sabbath to everyone that's entered Sabbath. It's Saturday morning here, Sabbath morning, and I appreciate that you've made this time for me. I know that our time differences are difficult, so thank you very much. So we're going to begin this evening's study with prayer, and I invite you to bow. Our loving God in heaven, we thank you that we're living in such a time that provides us with this technology that we can meet from distant countries, but also that we're living in these last days. The responsibility is heavy, but we ask that you would not let us carry anything that we are not capable of. We trust you in this, but we do ask for understanding of the time we're living in, for an understanding of the relevant truths and of what it is you're requiring of us. And we ask that we may know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Happy Sabbath again. And we have one session this evening. And I will do a review of some things that I've been tackling over the last couple of weeks. They're not, as all the messages are, they're developing, but I've had a few questions, so I thought it best to review some of it. But I thought maybe tonight we could start by just defining some symbols. So this is open meeting. Please feel free to jump in, to question, to comment at any time. But when we think of Babylon, we know that there are many symbols associated with it. And we've gotten really used to juggling those symbols. We're familiar with them. So let's think of a few. And we can run through the book of Daniel. We start in Daniel 2. We've got a few symbols for Babylon. We've got gold and a head. And even though they're mentioned together, they represent different things. We've got in Daniel 7, we've got a lion. We know that if we compare and contrast in Daniel 8 and go to Abraham's sacrifices in the book of Genesis, that we can place an ox there for Daniel 8 as the counterfeit sanctuary sacrifice. Then, of course, we've got the king of the north. We've got, we can also connect with Babylon, Assyria and the Chaldees. Even though they're separate, sometimes they get used together. If we go to the book of Revelation, we've got beasts and dragons and serpents that we can all connect with Babylon. So lots of symbols that we're familiar with. Now that we're at end time, we've got different symbols, and sometimes it's a bit hard to juggle them because we're just not so familiar. So I thought we could just write up a few so that we can think about them. Because even though I've been talking for a while, I can sometimes mix up my symbols. It's easy to do. So when we think of MAGA, what are these symbols associated with MAGA? What does it represent? Make
The
America
manosphere?
great. Sorry?
Oh, the manosphere?
Okay, the manosphere. So I'm thinking of, I agree, that's right, but I'm thinking of biblical symbols. I should have been more clear.
Seventh Kingdom.
Okay. So I wouldn't associate, say, the seventh kingdom, I'm going to put for Trumpism. So I want to separate MAGA from Trumpism. So MAGA is the woman. We could call it Babylon. We can call it the false prophet. It's an ideology. It's a religion. It's a national culture. Whereas Trumpism, that's where I put the seventh and eighth kingdom. The head. Or the dragon. It's what MAGA is going to ride. So think of Trumpism as the vessel, maybe even the Republican Party, that the MAGA, the woman, Babylon, the false prophet, the religion of the masses is going to ride. So what is the beast? I'm going to write that MAGA and Trumpism equals the beast. We think of Revelation 13, we see the beast as a whole. We don't see the church and the state separated as you do in Revelation 17. So it's a whole entity, even though they both exist. They're both working together. They're fused. They're combined, church and state combined. So MAGA and Trumpism would be the beast. MAGA is the culture, the religion, the ideology. Trumpism is the Republican Party, the vessel that MAGA rides. So we might, as time goes on, be able to associate other symbols with these political entities today as well. So any thoughts or questions?
That's really
Hello,
excellent.
Elder Terrie.
Sorry, Gloria.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I just think that's really excellent how you divided that and defined that, because right away you think of mega as red, right? Because you always see them in the red baseball caps and the red, and then the scarlet woman, or the woman that Trump is riding, right? Or the red dragon. It just brought all kinds of thoughts forward that I had never considered. So thank you.
Thank you.
How
So,
about
go on.
how about the King of the North? How would you associate King of the North there?
So the King of the North is also, it's a state power. So maybe we could put that there as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you
How
for
about
that.
Apis bull?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Apis bull, yes. So Apis bull, well, that's Quintus Fabius Maximus Gurgis. So that is the image, and Apis bull is, we'll talk about that in a little bit, is the sin of the church, of the Adventist church. But of course, it's the sin of the United States as well. It's just in a different form. So yes, Apis bull, manosphere, it all represents the same thing, idolatry. So yeah, I guess they're all words that we toss around as Adventists, and it can get hard to place where they actually fit. So I'm getting used to that as well and trip up on it. So if we can start to get familiar with them. I see 11 new messages. I'm going to have struggle to keep up with the chat, but thank you. Okay, so with that in mind, I want to just review Acts 27. We're not into any detail. I'm going to share screen and just bring up the original charts from 2018. And note here that we've got how Elder Tess expressed it in the Midnight Cry message, is that this is the experience of the United States in two different ways. So Adramyttium is the ship. So we've got two ships. Adramyttium is the ship, I shall abide in death. And it's the United States from a negative perspective. That it was given a warning message in 1989 and it chose to ignore it. Whereas Alexandria is the more positive ship. It's the good ship, the protector or defender of the people. But it shows the problems that the good ship encounters, how it goes off course, it gets knocked around by the east wind, it doesn't follow directions, and it finally gets shipwrecked. But we call it the good ship. It's designed to take Paul on his destination to Rome. So the top line, the negative perspective, begins in 1989, where it's given this message that it ignores, and so it's going to abide in death. And the positive story begins in 1798. It's going to go off course in 1863, and it's going to struggle through history, trying to fulfill its job function, which is to protect and defend the people. And this line neatly gives us the line of the 144,000, where I've got 1989, 9/11 to Sunday law, with our two waymarks in between, our increase of knowledge at Raphia and the formalisation at Panium. Then we can also note, because of the fractals, two more waymarks between Panium and Sunday law. One of them is which is 273, which takes us to the National Sunday Law. So that's how we were taught Acts, the two ships of Acts 27. But recently we've begun to understand that we've been using the term United States or USA quite broadly, and that it's more nuanced than that. Because when we consider the story and the symbology of Revelation 17, we've come to understand that the 6th and 7th kingdom are both opposing forces that are within the United States. So the 6th kingdom, we always understood that to be the United States, but way back we thought that the 7th kingdom would be maybe the United Nations. The Midnight Cry message corrected us on that, and we realised that the 6th and 7th were both within the United States. because through the Midnight Cry message, we realized that it's not globalism that's the threat. It's unilateralism that is the threat. So with our shift in our political views, the things that we used to be afraid of, we're no longer afraid of. So we're no longer afraid of globalism. So now when we look at these two ships, we can more accurately represent them as the sixth kingdom. That these are the story of the sixth kingdom. Using the term United States is too broad. The sixth kingdom was raised up in 1798 to be the protector or the defender of the people. But it went off course and it gets shipwrecked. It was given a warning message and it ignored it. So it's the sixth kingdom that gets shipwrecked at Sunday law. So we're starting to get used to the fact that the United States, USA, is a broad term in some of our prophetic understanding. It's useful in some things and it's too broad in others. So there was a study given in 2020, June 27, 2020, by Elder Tess. And the question she was looking to answer was, what is the sin of the United States? And why does it get shipwrecked at Sunday law? So now we would ask the question, what is the sin of the sixth kingdom? Why does the sixth kingdom get shipwrecked at Sunday law? And the title of that study that she gave is called State Nationalism. So that's the spoiler alert. What's the sin of the sixth kingdom? State nationalism. So even when we look at that title, we can see that there's it's very descriptive, because what the state is, sometimes we use state and nation as synonymous, but they're actually different. So state is a government entity, but nationalism is it's about the people, the identity of the people. So a state is a political entity with a government. A nation is a group of people with a shared identity, culture, or language. So we've understood through the Midnight Cry message that when we think of church and state, or religion and state, we now see religion as much broader than organised churches, that religion embraces all cultures. So if you put the culture and state together, it's the same as church and state. And church and state, or culture and state, or state nationalism is the sin of the sixth kingdom. So we could look at this here and say this is nationalism. And this is the state. The vessel that the nationalism, the will of the people will ride. That's why we use terms today like First Nations, instead of talking about our what we used to call Aboriginals here and Indigenous people. We now refer to them as the First Nations, because they were a nation before there was even a state, before there was organised government here. And you can have a number of nations within a state. So but when a state wants to adopt just one nation, one national identity, then it's dangerous for that country. So in that study of June 27, 2020, I'll just quote Elder Tess. What she's going to do is she's going to look at the histories as one connected story. So in the Acts 27, she's cut lines and we've put line over line, but she wants to go back and look at the whole history of the United States as one connected story. We're not going to do that today, but we do want to, my aim is to focus on 1798. And what she says is, one of the reasons that conspiracy theories exist is that people cannot recognize that we are dealing with the same issues that have plagued the United States for over 400 years. So there's no new thing under the sun. The issues that we're seeing today have plagued the United States from its inception. Excuse me. The issues being faced today are connected to the issues that have been in existence from the very beginning of the US as a colony. So she says, I'm not going to break the lines today. We're going to look at it as a progressive history. So I want to do part of that today. But before we do that, let's consider Revelation 12 and 13. So if you've got your Bibles or you've got your device, we're going to have a look at Revelation 12 and 13. So in Revelation 12, verse 1, John sees this symbol in the heavens. And it's a woman that's symbolizing a church. But what we know is that God has only ever had one church. Only ever been one. And this church that is God's church is now mature enough. It's been around a long time, but is now mature enough to have a child. So the Christian church is going to birth the Christ. So you see this woman that is paying to be delivered. And when this child is born, it's immediately going to be threatened by the great red dragon. And Ellen White tells us that in a primary sense, the dragon is Satan, but in a secondary sense, it's pagan Rome. So we know pagan Rome, Herod, Satan wants to kill this child as soon as it's born. The child escapes and is taken to heaven in those first few verses. And so now the dragons is going to concentrate on persecuting the church. And as a result, the church has to hide, and it will hide for 1260 years. So if we go to the end of chapter 12, we can go to verse 14, where the woman flies into the wilderness for a time, times and half a time, from the face of the serpent. So the threat to the woman is from the dragon. Verse 15, and the serpent or the dragon casts out of its mouth water as a flood. So what the dragon wants to do is flush the woman out so that it can destroy the church. But the church gets help in verse 16. And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened up its mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of its mouth. So the woman is able to find safety from the earth. And we mark that as the story told in 13 verse 1. So So a story that's familiar to us all. We've got John standing on the beach, and when he looks out one way, he's going to see the papacy, this dragon beast in the sea, in Europe, in the old world. And then we know that he's standing in 1798. When he looks the other way, he's going to see the USA, the earth, in the new world. So the church is going to find protection on the other side of the world. So church goes from old world to new world. Verse 17, and the dragon was wroth with the church and went to make war with the remnant of its seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. So if church goes from old world to new world, where's the dragon going? The dragon is following. So in the new world, in the earth, we're going to see the dragon power. And we want to be able to identify the dragon. So over here, we have the church and the dragon. And the USA is the earth that is going to provide the church with protection. But we know now that the USA is more complex than that within the USA, there is two opposing forces, the sixth kingdom and the seventh kingdom. So which one of those is going to provide protection for the church? It'll be the sixth kingdom. So which one of those is going to be dangerous for the church? Be the seventh kingdom. Why? Because the seventh kingdom is going to make an image to the fifth kingdom. And we know what happened to the church during the reign of the fifth kingdom. So the fifth and the seventh are dangerous to the church. But when we look at the story of Acts 27, it's a story of the sixth kingdom. So what went wrong with the sixth kingdom? The seventh and the fifth, they're kind of easy because they never tried to be anything more than what they are. But the sixth kingdom had a job function that it's failed to do. So that's what we will continue to look at. What church are we talking about, by the way? Those that keep the commandments of God and have the faith of Jesus. So that church is the SDA. And we know the SDA is going to go off course as well. Okay. So I'm going to go back to Tessa's study, like I said, June 27, 2020. And where Tess takes us is back to 1619. I might rub that out. So 1619. Do you remember why she marked 1619? So there's no governments to speak of there's just small British colonies. And this is the first time that these small British colonies are going to institute representative government. So we mark here representative government. And within a few weeks of creating this representative government, what arrives on the shores of the United States?
Was it the Mayflower?
So the Mayflower is the next year.
Okay.
So before there's even a Mayflower, we've got, but it's all in that same time period. So Mayflower's the next year. So you've got representative government and you've got the first slaves arriving on the shores of the earth. And what the representative government is going to do is enact Sunday laws. So we've got slavery and Sunday law. We've got the two things that we note from, this is 1888 and this is 1850. The two things that will give us our triple application to understand Sunday law in our history. So America's going to go through a revolution. They'll win against the British monarchy. They're going to create a constitution, a Bill of Rights, and then we're going to come to 1798. And what do we note here in 1798? Because this is where Revelation 13 is going to take us to the lamb-like beast. Yeah. Okay, so 1798. I want to share. Actually, I've got we might read this first. We talked about the title of this study was called State Nationalism. And I just found some nice quotes on nationalism. I thought we might just read those.
You know, Elder Terry, while you're looking for that, Putin
Yep.
did the same thing. Putin united his people under patriotism, tradition, and well, he pulled in the church, but sort of the same way Trump is. But yeah, culture, tradition,
Yeah.
patriotism.
Yes, it's the what it's Lenin said that religion was the opiate of the masses, but these have tapped into something even bigger than religion. I guess it's a religion of itself. But these quotes are from Sidney J. Harris. He's an American journalist, and they're written in the 1950s, 1950 and 1982, actually, but they're very appropriate today. And he said that the difference between patriotism and nationalism is that the patriot is proud of their country for what it does, and the nationalist is proud of their country no matter what it does. The first attitude creates a feeling of responsibility, but the second, a feeling of blind arrogance that leads to war. The second quote, patriotism is proud of a country's virtues and eager to correct its deficiencies. It also acknowledges the legitimate patriotism of other countries with their own specific virtues. The pride of nationalism, however, trumpets its country's virtues and denies its deficiencies, while it is contemptuous toward the virtues of other countries. It wants to be, and proclaims itself to be, the greatest. But greatness is not required of a country. Only goodness is. So I thought they were good quotes, given that they're, decades old, and yet they speak to today. And if you to take these quotes and think on them, we can actually apply them at a personal level. That we can have self-worth, but not that individual nationalism that thinks itself better than others, that trumpets its own virtues, denies its own deficiencies, and doesn't recognise the virtues of others. So what we see at a national level can also be brought down to the individual. And that greatness is not required of a country, only goodness is. So, the MAGA wants to make America great again. The problem is that ship was meant to be a good ship. So what went wrong with the Sixth Kingdom that it failed to be good? Trumpism, great. Seventh Kingdom, great. Sixth Kingdom's meant to be good. So there's something went wrong with the good bit. Okay. So
too many compromises.
Compromise or inaction. Now, I'll look at another, before we look at 1798. So prior to 1798, the country is it's just a fledgling country. It's only existed as a state for like 10 years, really. And the first president, I'm preaching to the choir, is George Washington. And the founding fathers were very anxious about having political parties. And so when George Washington took office, he made sure that his cabinet was filled with all different people from different sides. And he had, didn't have 2 terms, and then he was asked to run a third. So let's read this here. Under the newly enacted Constitution, George Washington was elected president twice with little drama. It was unknown if Washington would seek a third term until less than 2 months before Election Day. Washington said on September 17, 1796, he wouldn't seek a third term in his well-crafted farewell address to the American public, written with some help from Alexander Hamilton and James Madison. With that announcement, it became certain the 1796 election on November 4, 1796, would be the first race contested by divided political parties with separate candidates for office, a fact not lost on Washington. And this is what he said. They serve to organize faction, to give it an artificial and extraordinary force, to put in the place of the delegated will of the nation, the will of a party, often a small but artful and enterprising minority of the community, he said in his farewell address. They are likely, in the course of time and things, to become potent engines by which cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men will be enabled to subvert the power of the people and to usurp for themselves the reins of government, destroying afterward the very engines which have lifted them to unjust dominion. So that's almost a prophecy. This is what they feared would happen with the introduction of different political parties. So what we have in 1798, well, we mark 1798 as the deadly wound. Put that there. Napoleon, he's not emperor. He's got some title. He's head of all the army. He sends one of his generals to Rome, and you know the story. The Pope is taken captive. So we mark that in 1798. The other things that we always noted from 1798 was it was when America sent its first ambassadors overseas. So first ambassadors. Which means that other countries are seeing the United States as a sovereign nation. Whenever a country has a coup, you always sit back and wait till things settle down because you never know how fluid it's going to be, how volatile. So things had settled down over the decade, and now America's ambassadors were being recognised. The Marine Corps and Navy were founded, even though there'd been Army before that and some Navy. This is where they mark the formalisation of the Marines. And the other thing we've noted, when I say we, these are things that have been taught from Elder Jeff's time, the Alien and Sedition Act. So they were 4 laws. So our presidents are, I'll just note them here, Jefferson, and point blank. John Adams.
Adams.
Thank you. So there'd been an election in 1796. Adams is from the Federalist Party. I should have written that. Jefferson is from the Democratic Republican Party. And they are, just as Washington was afraid of, they're very hostile towards each other. Very toxic relationship, and very partisan politics in America in 1798. So these 3 things here are all connected with the quasi-French War. So during the Revolution, France had helped the United States. It had loaned it money to fight against the British, and now the United States decided it wasn't going to pay it back. And so the French were commandeering US merchant vessels that were taking goods to Britain because they had a trade agreement with Britain. And this was creating quite a crisis, and there was a fear of an escalation of war. It's called a quasi-war because even though there was some naval battles, war was never declared. It was never openly declared. So it was a quasi-war. But there was this fear. So that's why the ambassadors were sent to France to sort out the problems with the trade deals. That's why the Marine and Navy Corps were established. And one of the policies of the Federalist Party is they wanted a strong federal bank, and the Democratic Republicans were totally against that, but they wanted that bank so that they could fund this war that might happen any minute. And these 4 acts, the Alien and Sedition Acts. So when we think of 1798, we have to not judge too harshly, because it's just a nascent country. It's just been birthed. There are no immigration laws, hardly any criminal laws, no federal criminal laws, no immigration laws or immigration. Today there are hundreds and thousands of officers within the Homeland Security, within intelligence. What you see today just didn't exist in 1798. So these laws were enacted thinking that, well, they have no internet, they have no email, and if they get an invasion, you got to get on your horse and gallop off to the Congress, because only Congress can declare a war. So these powers were granted to the executive branch in case of invasion when Congress wasn't sitting. So it doesn't seem so crazy if you look at it in context. But even so, these laws were hated by the people, and very much by the Democratic Republican Party. They were very much opposed to these laws and to the power that it was giving the president and the executive branch. So much so that these laws of what tainted John Adams' legacy. That's what he's known for, and he lost government because of them. And even with the Alien Acts were to be able to deport people, deport the French and to deport the Irish in case there was an invasion, because the French were your enemies and so were the Irish. They didn't like the Irish because they were Catholic and they were anti-British. So they're trouble. So you want to be able to deport them without due process. And that was the power that the president had to just for no reason or any reason say, you've got to, well, I can lock you up and I can deport you. I can do anything with you. So the Sedition Acts, the First Amendment of free speech hadn't been tested yet. And they didn't even know how to word that First Amendment. There were a lot of arguments over how to word that. So that was very, it's not even going to be tested in the court until the 1880s. So nobody really knew what it meant and how to apply the First Amendment. Do we just let the press say whatever they want in time of war? So that was why the Sedition Acts. So 3 of these acts were time sensitive, and they just, I think it was 1801, they were off the books. But one of those acts, the Alien Enemy Act, is still on the books. So Jefferson, who was very opposed to these laws, when he came in government, and he won the next election basically because of these, he kept that on the books. Nobody ever dealt with that Alien Enemy Act. So these laws, they violated the separation of powers. They left it up to the president. And like I said, they were time limited and they expired in the early 1800s. So one can almost forgive the government for enacting these in what was anxious times and this new new country, new government, but it was strongly opposed from people who could see the potential that these laws had in the future. So this is how the good ship set sail in 1798. We've got two opposing forces. One is speaking like a dragon, and one is opposing that. So what we also learned is that during this time, we see a split in the Protestant churches, and you've got your conservative, maybe I'll just write it up here. So conservative Protestants are going to back Adams and the Federalist Party, and the socially liberal Protestants are going to back the Democratic Republicans and Jefferson. This split in the Protestant churches comes about because of the two Great Awakenings. And it's the conservative Protestants that are going to introduce conspiracy theories in 1798. So we're going to mark conspiracy theories. So it's actually a combination of the Alien and Sedition Acts that Adams introduces and these conspiracy theories about the Illuminati coming to take over the American government. These conspiracy theories were designed to attack Adams' enemies. It's a combination of this that's going to get Jefferson elected in 1800 and will ultimately bring down the Federalist Party. The Federalist Party is going to be finished in this history, and it will never run again. So we can see two opposing forces between Adams and Jefferson, between the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans, and I would suggest between the Seventh and the Sixth Kingdom, that they are both existing, that the Sixth Kingdom is keeping the Seventh in check, is restraining it. And this is the fight that will continue through the history of the United States. It's been there from its very inception. So one of the key things to recognizing which side would be the dragon is we can see the conspiracy theories that are being promulgated by the conservative Protestants. And the other thing is these unrighteous decrees. So we can see what's wrong with the Federalist government. The problem is we can look at the Democratic Republicans and go, well, they're the good ship. They're the nice ones. If we can get this history right, then what we can do is take this history and come down to our time at the end and make application. Because if we take a strong look at Jefferson and the Democratic Republicans, we can see a lot of failures. So I spent too much time reading about Jefferson. So much time, I think I felt more sympathetic to John Adams than Jefferson. But I recognise that we've got to be kind, because this is a fledgling country and it's just starting off. But the idea is to learn from your mistakes. Remember what patriotism is. It's realizing your weaknesses and building on them. Whereas nationalism is, we don't make mistakes. Somebody else must be making the mistake. So Jefferson, John Adams and his son, John Quincy Adams, are the only two presidents out of the first 12 presidents not to hold slaves. Jefferson, as you know, had over 600 and had children with some of his slave women. And when he died, his children that were birthed from the slave housewoman were set free, but all the others were just sold off, regardless of their family connections. They were sold off and separated. And so you can look into the history of Jefferson and you can see, and this party, and you can see some very troubling signs. And one of them, I guess, that sticks out, and the slavery is obvious, is the hypocrisy. The Federalist government, they wanted a strong federal bank. Democratic Republicans, very opposed to it, until the Federalist Party finished, and then they started adopting a lot of their policies. And when Jefferson enacted the Louisiana Purchase, he used federal funds to do that. He used federal funds to build up the army. There was many things that they borrowed from the Federalists into their own policies. So the hypocrisy is there for all to see. There were some other things that he did. He depended upon the National Bank to fund the Louisiana Purchase. They actually increased executive power for themselves as well. The slaves you're probably familiar with. Yeah, so he's got a complicated presidency and legacy. And this is the story, really, of the Sixth Kingdom, the Democratic Republicans. So I'm going to bring up a chart. And this, I really like this chart because it's an overly simplified history, and I just think that suits us very well to have things overly simplified. That's what we do with our lines. And it shows the parties of the first party system. So we've got the Federalist Party on the red here, the red line, and the Democratic Republican Party. You can see the beginning of the government from George Washington as president, and how they were pretty much united. There was, like I said, George Washington made sure he had opposing views in his cabinet. He thought that was a good idea, and it worked well. Once he stepped out of office and John Adams took the presidency, we see a major split with the two-party system. The Federalist Party believed in a central bank. They were pro-British. The Democratic Republican Party were pro-French. So you couldn't get more opposite. The Federalist Party, they believed in a loose interpretation of the Constitution, whereas the Democratic Republican Party, they believed in strict interpretation of the Constitution. The Federalists, their supporters were merchants, bankers, wealthy farmers, wealthy plantation owners. They were well educated. The Democratic Republican Party were more commoners, middle and lower class, and not highly educated. The Federalists believed in tariffs and protection for businesses, and it was economy-based, whereas the Democratic Republicans were agriculture-based. Adams believed in American exceptionalism, whereas the Democratic Republican Party believed in the voice of the masses. John Adams really didn't have any trust in the common man, whereas Jefferson said he did. Adams didn't trust public opinion. Let's put it that way. He didn't trust public opinion. So once the Federalist Party dies, we see James Madison will take the presidency for 2 years, and it enters into this time period called the era of good feelings, where there is only one political party, and it's the Democratic Republican Party. The era of good feelings wasn't all that good. So it was called that because, well, the Napoleonic Wars had finished. There wasn't much happening in international affairs. It was a time of relative peace, and you only had one party. So that toxic relationship between the parties was gone. However, the Democratic Republican Party has a lot of infighting, and then it eventually is going to split. And one of the movers and shakers of that is Martin Van Buren, and he'll take the presidency later on, but he's one of the movers and shakers in the split of the parties here. And this is where we get our National Republican Party, the Whig Party, and the Democrat Party, the two parties that we're most familiar with today. And so without going much further into this history, the point I want to make is that from its very inception, the United States has these two opposing forces. You can see them in 1798. You can see the restraint that is held on the Federalist Party by the Democratic Republican Party. But then we're going to start to see a failure in the Democratic Republican Party. It's going to split, and we're going to see that history repeated. You're going to have the Democratic Party that is anti-abolition, the Whig Party that is pro-abolition. And down through the history of the United States, that tension is going to remain. But one party is going to restrain and keep in check the other party. So the 6th and 7th Kingdom have existed together from the United States very beginning, but the 7th Kingdom is held in check. The history of the Millerite movement, we see the 7th Kingdom try to rise, and we see that in the history of the Civil War period, and it will again it'll fail during that time period. It will fail again during the history of the 1888 time period. So our two Sunday law time periods of slavery and Sunday, where the 7th Kingdom is rising. And now we come down to our time in 1989. And one of the things we need to recognize is that the party that we may feel is the good ship, because it was intended to be the good ship, it's the one that fails to protect and defend God's people, fails because of hypocrisy, fails to put the right protections for women and protect the rights that were won through Roe versus Wade, fails to repeal the Alien Acts of 1798, fails in so many things because it thinks, like the Democratic Republican Party did back in the 1798 history, thinks that, oh, we've got a different political atmosphere now. Those things will not be a problem. Women have rights now. Women have achieved a lot. They fail to see what hasn't been done for women, what hasn't been done for migrants, for the protection of minority rights. And so it fails in those things. So the Sixth Kingdom fails. The Sixth Kingdom is what gets shipwrecked. It goes off course and it doesn't provide for the people as its job function was originally intended. So on that note, is there any questions or thoughts?
I have a question about the Federalist Party with John Adams. Would you consider that the Republican, but they're for small government though, right?
No, so the Democrat-Republican Party wanted small government. They believed that, I'm just trying to, maybe I'll find Jefferson's quote. But no, so this was small government. Federalists wanted big government. They were the ones who wanted federalization. These were anti-federalization, but they've formed a party. They've recognized, well, we're going to federalize. We've got a constitution. So we're going to federalize, but we're going to make sure we put a check on federalization, on big government. So this party here was actually originally called Republican Party, but history has changed the name to Democratic Republican Party so that we don't confuse it with today's Republican Party. It has no connection with today's Republican Party. But that's why it's called the Democratic Republican Party. It's the Federalists that were for big government, central bank, strong executive power. Jefferson was very much opposed to that until he became president. And then they adopted some of the policies that the
So if you would compare it to our parties today, would you say that Federalist is more like Republican and the Democratic Republican is the Democratic Party?
If we were to make that application, yes. So
Okay.
this is the side that fails. This is the side that's meant to put the restraint and to protect the people.
And also, just to clarify, the Federalists, when they say strong central government, strong executive, is that what
Yes. So
the president would have the much power? Is that what it is?
Yes. So Jefferson was for state power. Don't take away power from the states. So the United States realized early on that to have a strong unified front, that there needed to be a federal government. And the argument always was, well, how much power will the federal government have? So that's why the Constitution was written. And the Constitution was written largely by Federalists. But in order to sell it to the anti-Federalists, you needed to have a Bill of Rights. So the Democratic Republicans, even though that party didn't exist then, but the people that, or the men that did form that party were largely responsible for the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights puts a restraint on the Constitution. It fleshes it out.
But today, Trump is trying to get rid of all the federalism, right? And he wants just the executive to be the most powerful. But he wants all the institutions be diminished.
Okay, so back here, there aren't many institutions. This is the beginning. There aren't that many laws. This is the beginning of the government. So the institutions are only just rising up and being created as they seemed necessary. So we've got to see similarities and differences.
Thank
But
you.
the principle is there, and that John Adams, with the Alien and Sedition Act, can override Congress, because only Congress can declare war. But what if they get invaded? What if the French actually, get off their ships and get on the land, and Congress, the people have got to get on their horses. They've got to get to Washington. It was a different world back then. And yet the principles are still the same. John Adams was taking the power away from the Congress, and they were putting it on the executive branch. This is the birth of the nation. There's no Supreme Court. There's hardly any, there are no federal criminal laws, and then there's no immigration laws. They're meant to grow. It's just like this movement. We started very simply, but we've grown and we've matured, and our message matures and continues to do that. Our organisation grows. As our organisation grows, we learn from past mistakes. That's the difference between patriotism and nationalism. Nationalism is we don't make mistakes. Patriotism is, we can be proud of what we've got, of who we are, but we've got a lot of work to do. So there's principles I want to pull from this history, but we have to be careful. When you read a lot about Jefferson and Adams, it's you can be very unforgiving. But the world is changing, and they're on their way. But we still look back and we learn from the mistakes. Just looking. Yes, Susan says the more educated Federalists were for abolition, and the agrarian, less educated Democratic Republicans were for slave labor. Yes, Jefferson thought that the country would fall apart without slave labor. And that's why he with the Louisiana Purchase, it depended on slave labor. Then we come down into, we've run out of time, but if we were to go down into the history of the annexation of Texas, it's just history being repeated. And also when we think of the if you go back to the ancient Israel and the northern and southern kingdoms, we know that it was the northern kingdom that got swept away first. It was at fault. But it's the it's the southern kingdom that gets the punishment, because it should have learnt the lessons. It should have adopted the changes. It should have seen what happened to the north and taken a good look at itself. That's the problem with the Sixth Kingdom as well. It's that history being repeated.
Terry, on the topic of North and Southern kingdoms, with respect to the 6th and the 7th in our time, how do you look at Biden being the president in 21 at the time of Panium rather than Republican?
It wasn't Rome that brought down
I guess because we've made the remarks that the 6th kingdom isn't the king of the the north. So that was one thing that was just hanging up in my brain, how to resolve that.
So that is a conundrum. The sixth kingdom is not the king of the north. The seventh kingdom is the king of the north. There's no visibility of the sixth kingdom in Daniel chapter 11. And yet it is Biden and Panium. The sixth kingdom did its appointed work. The seventh kingdom wouldn't have brought down Russia.
Elder Terrie?
That help?
Yes, thank you,
Yes?
Terry.
Yeah, it's Mary. So my question is connected with the statement that you've just added there, because I was thinking about the statue of Daniel 2, and I see the fourth kingdom towards the very end. We see the iron, the feet, and the clay. So I was wondering where the sixth kingdom comes in there with the feet of iron and clay.
So in Daniel chapter 2, it's the story of the king of the north. The prophecies of Daniel are built on the principle of repeat and enlarge. So what happens when we get to Revelation 17 is we're getting more detail that is not seen in previous prophecies. So there is no visibility of the sixth kingdom in Daniel 2, just like there isn't in Daniel 7. It's the story of the king of the north.
Okay.
So in 1798, we've got a fledgling government, and it's a government that God can work with, just like the church. William Miller's got the Cruden's Concordance in his hand. He has the tools that are going to unlock Daniel chapter 8. It's a work in progress. Same with the United States. It's a work in progress. Miller will have to learn from his mistakes. The United States will have to learn from their mistakes. But they're growing, but they both represent entities that God can work with. The sixth kingdom will do a good work, but we have to recognize when it starts to fail. It didn't fail in the Millerite time period. It didn't fail in the 1888 time period. It's failing for us. It failed for us. It failed with Dobbs. It's failing now with the Alien Enemies Act. It's failing with the deportations. It's failing. Its failure is being felt today.
Okay, so another question. Thank you for that answer. So in 1989, I think Elder Palmer marked the end or the ending of the sixth kingdom. I was wondering whether there's any particular event with regards to what you've talked about, the state power, whether there is any particular event that would mark that fall.
Sorry, the fall of the fifth kingdom?
The sixth.
United, the sixth.
Yeah.
In 1989.
Mm-hmm.
So we mark the decline of the sixth kingdom between Panium and Sunday law, and the rise of the seventh kingdom between Panium and Sunday law. So that's one story. My understanding of what Elder Punminder was teaching is that you can also mark it from 1989, you'll start to see the decline of the sixth kingdom. And you can also mark it from 1798.
Okay.
So the seventh kingdom is going to try and rise. The sixth kingdom will restrain it. When the seventh kingdom failed in the Millerite time history, so did the movement.
There's
Camille
a
Wright.
difference between decline and end. It didn't end. He never marked the end of the sixth. He marked the beginning of the decline, just as we did between Panium and the Sunday Law. That's not an end. That's just a decline.
Yeah, but my question was what marks that decline and the beginning of the decline of the sixth? Because we talk at the Sunday law, it comes to its end.
It's failure to stop unilateralism. So I guess this is we're
It's
kind of running out
failure
of
to
time.
stop
Just my
unilateralism. It's failure to do more to protect the LGBTQ community. It's failure to do more to support women's rights. It's failure to do more to set better things in place to protect immigrants' rights. All of the things that we see failing now, it's the failure that was there from then. It's just escalated over the years. Just as we saw at 1798, there was failure of the Sixth Kingdom there with the Alien and Seditions Act. They actually adopted and used it to their benefit. The Sixth Kingdom has always been wishy-washy.
Amen. I had a train of thought. So yeah, we can see a decline, but as Olivine said, it doesn't end in those histories. It's in this history where there's a decline and an actual end for the Sixth Kingdom.
Do you have time for one more question, maybe?
Sure.
You know, your tapestry that you showed of the British Museum with the United States as a woman depicted as a woman in your second part of your 1798. And I was so glad that you were picking up that the dragon moved through history like we had learned when Jeff was teaching, because you're pulling together truths that we knew but had forgotten. And so when you showed that tapestry, there was a dragon on the head. And it wasn't clear for me whose head that was on, if that was France. And the dragon would have been in France. And so my question kind of is on that. So in 1798, when you're saying that both both aspects, the dragon and the lamb-like beast, are present, they're present here. So the dragon was here, was the torch passed, so to speak? Is that the way to see it, Elder Terrie, from France to the United States? In the beginnings of the United States?
Yes, so if you think of Revelation 11, which is the story which I guess, Adventists have traditionally seen as the story of the French Revolution, it's Sodom and Gomorrah. Sorry, not Sodom and Gomorrah. Egypt and Sodom. Is that right? Egypt and Sodom.
Sodom and atheism, yeah.
That's it. And Egypt is the dragon power. So the dragon power was there in revolutionary France. What we used to teach was that when the revolution died, dragon goes underground and followed those revolutions across Europe and rose up in Russia. And Russia became the dragon power. But we were wrong, because the dragon follows the church, and the church didn't go to Russia.
Right.
We were nationalistic. Dragon can't go to the United States. The United States is the glorious land, and it's glorious, right? And it's good. No, it follows the church. It's there. That's the tension that's been within the United States from the beginning. And I think it was our nationalism that failed to see that, to follow the dragon where it actually went. Of course, it's going to follow the woman. It seems so obvious now. But
Yes.
there was a time where it didn't. It went to Russia because Russia are the bad guys. And this is the discussion Elder Parmin has been having about what's good and what's bad. We need to make sure that we understand when something is bad, that it's actually doing good. The seventh kingdom is rising for a purpose and bringing judgment upon the failure of the seventh kingdom. So, and that's a good thing.
The hammer.
And it's actually, as horrible as it is, we have to juggle two things at the same time, because our emotions are like, well, this is horrible, and it is. It's terrible. At the same time, that's why we're a movement. We're the ones that recognize that. We're the ones that say Babylon is fallen, is fallen.
Thank you. You're making it difficult so much simpler to understand. I really appreciate the way that you're teaching these, concepts simply, because they're so detailed. But once you get the basic principles understood, then you can pile the details on there. So
I feel like I trip up too. Like, it hasn't been an easy exercise, but it is good to go back into these histories. And I've said it once, I've said it a million times. It's all there in the Midnight Cry message. Go back and we listen, and we're told what the sin of the United States is. And the sin of the United States is state nationalism. And it's there from its beginning. And if we cut the line, that means if we don't see the progression of this through the history, we end up with a conspiracy theory. Listen to that. Apply that. Go back and trace the dragon through the history of the United States. Trace the progressive nature of the rise of that kingdom. And then we can overlay, but we need to see the progress as well. Otherwise, we end up with a conspiracy theory. State nationalism is the sin of the sixth kingdom. That's why it gets shipwrecked.
And
It's adopted the principles of the seventh. Sorry?
We can see the same with the Seventh-day Adventist Church, like the Jewish nation. It was nationalism. Instead of being the influence that God intended it to be on the world, it shut itself away, isolated itself, and thought of itself as better than the world. Likewise, the Seventh-day Adventist Church shut itself away. Within the period of the 17th and the 1800s, the Seventh-day Adventist Church could have had a lot of influence on the government and on the United States politics itself, with its health principles, with the sanitarium, with the education system that God had instituted and established. And what we have seen is that the church, instead of going and doing its work of public evangelism, instead of going and doing its work of being progressive and educating the United States, it built its walls around itself and shut itself in and failed to do its work. So it's similar to state nationalism.
That's the story of the Southern Kingdom. And that's why they're twin institutions in the parable of Acts 27. Thank you, Olivine.
Elder Terrie, you said that the failure of the sixth kingdom was because they didn't protect God's people. Would you say because it's a gender that's our test, it failed to protect the woman and the LGBTQ rights? Would you say that's the sin of the sixth kingdom? It's failure now?
So state nationalism is that combination of culture and state, where it's looking after its own interests and not seeing the broad picture of what's needing, thinking that everything's been achieved. Even though there might be some more rights that women, need, but, generally speaking, they've really got it good now. And not recognizing how far we are from that. And so they failed to secure Dobbs, and Dobbs is just a springboard. It's just a beginning. It's really not much in the scheme of things as far as rights go. But yes, but that's all tied up with, as Olivine was saying about the church, they play church. Sixth Kingdom is just playing government and not really going about the business of its higher calling.
Just now, I read this article from the Supreme Court, from the New York Times. Supreme Court lets Trump suspend grants to teachers over DEI initiatives. So there you have the Supreme Court failing to do its work over DEI initiatives. And look at what Trump is doing. He's importing the DEI, his fight against the DEI worldwide.
Also,
So,
Alvin, interesting that in that what just happened with the Supreme Court is that John Roberts actually sided with the liberals in that, even though the conservatives voted all the majority, John Roberts. It's kind of interesting to think about why he did what he did.
yeah, Crimea River, he's done a lot of damage. Now his conscience is playing. Yeah, so as Olivine said, the Trump administration is now starting to fiddle with our government's DEI policies, that they're not going to fund certain things for our universities if we've got DEI. That means we've got to have our governments done enough to secure these rights for us. And the answer is no. That's why it's got to come to an end.
The article says it's worldwide. They came to Jamaica, I'm sure it's about the same thing. And in Jamaica, there is already a lack of diversity, equity, and anything. And they were here, and those meetings were highly secretive. Nobody has heard what they were here talking about, but you can tell. So the issue with the DEI is bigger than which we think. As you were pointing out, that Roe v. Wade, it's just the smoke. Watch the issue with the DEI and watch how the world will suffer. That's what we are to look for.
Terrie?
Yes?
I just wanted to ask, could you clarify what you made a statement a few minutes back about the Seventh Kingdom punishing? Who is the Seventh Kingdom punishing? It's the Sixth Kingdom, right? Or who is that correct?
Yeah, the Sixth Kingdom is shipwrecked. So
All right,
Acts 27 is the story of the Sixth Kingdom. So we don't have visibility of the Seventh Kingdom in Acts 27, but largely so when we say punish, we use it in the same context that we say curse. So when we look back at, say, the original curses, when God said, you're going to have to earn your living by the sweat of your brow, and having babies is going to be painful, right? That was just or I should say, your husband is going to rule over you. That's the better one. The husband is going to rule over you. They're the consequences of what's happened. We know, when we're talking about a curse, that God hasn't sort of looked at his list and gone, yeah, you can have this problem and you can have that problem. What God's done has said, this is a consequence of your actions.
Exactly.
And so we see the Democrat Party today in all sorts of trouble, despite Booker's amazing speech. It's in all sorts of trouble, and it's just a consequence of its failure. the punishment, the consequence of its failure is Trumpism, is MAGA, is a failure to really nail down the rights of the people.
Thank you.
So when we say Babylon is fallen, should we reconsider that term? I know we began with defining what Babylon is, because it does seem like we are talking about the sixth, the failure of the sixth.
So Babylon at the end of the world is a coalition. It's a coalition of the dragon and the beast and the false prophet. So as we wrote earlier, it is state nationalism. It is the dragon. It is MAGA and the Republican Party. This is it. Yeah, did I?
Would you consider that the fall of Babylon in 538 came before Cyrus actually invaded? When Belshazzar went into the temple, took the things from the temple, used them, uplifted itself, because it's similar to what Nebuchadnezzar did. So, but even when we look with Zechariah pronounced Babylon is fallen. Way after 538 BC, Zechariah was pronouncing that from 520. Babylon had already fallen. So there's a principle there that needs to be seen, what the fall of Babylon means. It is not, what do we call it? It's Babylon exalting itself. That's the fall of Babylon.
Yeah, Babylon was announced as fallen. Cyrus is surrounding, but it's business as usual in the city. They've got no idea of their impending doom. And that's what kind of Sunday law looks like, doesn't it? It's like business as usual. Life goes on.
Oh, I wanted to say, when you said out about the in pain you will bring forth, and then you shifted. Look at it now with the overturning of Roe v. Wade. A woman that is raped having to be forced to carry a child. We take pain in a literal physical sense, but I'm sure now parabolically we can understand that pain is not the literal physical travail of labor, but rather the pain that you have to endure. Remember when Trump just one, the men said, the people were saying, you will have children whether you want to have children or you don't want to have children. You will be bred. That's the pain that I believe that the curse that is talking about. Not the physical labor that a woman endures, but all that is now heaped upon the woman because the protection, exactly, Susan, emotional, psychological torment that now women have to endure, whether she wants to have a child or not. It is forced upon you. That's the pain.
And that's why you see natalism very much connected with MAGA. Not with all aspects. The barstool conservatives, they don't care for having children, but the larger portion of MAGA are very much pro-natalist. And that's the policy that Elon Musk is promoting as well. So that's our calling, is to breed. Yeah, and I think that's, like you said, that's part of that curse, original curse. It will come with patriarchy. But what also gets me about those curses is how sexist it is, because women have been tilling the soil by their sweat of the brow just as much as men too. So all three curses fall. I'm going to get in huge trouble for going over an hour and 15 minutes. So my apologies to the translators. Thank you very much. And I'll close in prayer. loving God in heaven, we look back on history and we need to see what is wrong, but we also need to be kind and understand what you're working with, to understand time and context, and to realize that we're living in a time when we have no excuses. We have nothing to fear for the future. Help us to learn from the past. Help us not to make the mistakes of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and help us to realize what this kingdom means and what it's to provide the people. So, Lord, I pray for the members in the United States, that you would bless them, bless the ministry, bless this Sabbath, grant them a good night's sleep. And I thank you for them. And I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.